evening and welcome to How to Safely Use Payment Apps, a program brought to you by the Howard County Office of Consumer Protection and its advisory board. Want to let everyone know that this program is being recorded and it will be available later in case you missed anything. And first up, we're going to have an introductory video by the County Executive, Dr. Calvin.
The COVID-19 pandemic has increased the economic demand for contactless payment methods. Increasingly, consumers have opted for peer-to-peer payment apps. But what are your rights as a consumer when using these apps? What if there's a dispute or you are defrauded by online criminals? As we celebrate National Consumer Protection Week, our Office of Consumer Protection is highlighting how and when to safely use these payment apps and what rights you have, and more importantly, don't have. Thank you, Tracy, and our entire team for keeping our community safe and informed.
So good evening again. I'm Tracy Resvani, the administrator at the Office of Consumer Protection. And let's move on to our presentation on how to safely use payment apps. So as the introductory video noted, contactless payments became really crucial during the pandemic. And a lot of folks ended up using it without really recognizing exactly what the best situation is to be using them, how not to use them, and what their rights were. But before we get into that, I want to tell you a little bit about our agency. So what do? We handle disputes between consumers and merchants and between landlords and tenants. I like to say that if you've paid money for a good or service and you're not happy with the end result, with some limited exceptions, you can file a complaint with our office. We have investigators who will then look at the facts, look at the law, and try to help the dispute be resolved. If you're not sure of your rights and you want to talk to someone, these investigators are available to be able to speak with you either by phone, by email, or even in person. So if you have a lot of records and you want someone to be able to go through them and help you understand what's happened, that's what we're here for. If in the course of an investigation we determine that the law has been broken, as a law enforcement agency, we do also have the ability to fine and issue civil citations. We do a lot of programs like this, whether virtually or in person. So if you belong to a civic group, a business group, a community group, church group, what have you, we're happy to take your invitations and come and provide presentations on whatever subject matter you think would be of interest. Lastly, we also license and regulate certain businesses. So peddlers and solicitors in Howard County need to get a license from us. And those who do trespass tows, those involuntary tows for you if you happen to park where you shouldn't have been, they're the ones who are getting licensed by our office. So we not only do we license them, but we do regulate towers, peddlers, and solicitors. So before we get into the e-payments or the P2P, peer-to-peer payment systems, I want to talk a little bit about all of the various payment options that you have other than obviously cash. One is credit cards. Credit cards are not linked to a bank account. They help build your credit. They have legal protections under the Fair Credit Billing Act, and they either come in this chip, tap and pay, or swipe. And hopefully your credit cards are no longer in swipe mode because of a federal law that went into effect a few years back that says that if you have a data breach and your point of sale system isn't taking chip, then you are more liable than if you had a chip reader. So that's something to know about. Debit cards are those cards that are linked to your bank account. So they used to be ATM cards. Now they're these debit cards, these ATM cards that have the Visa, MasterCard logo. So when you shop, the money comes directly out of your bank account. It's not a credit card. It's really not truly a debit card either. They're these hybrid cards, so they don't have any protections under the Fair Credit Billing Act. So what is that statute? That's the statute that caps your liability for frauds or disputes to $50. So those exist for credit cards. That cap does not exist for these hybrid cards. So those cards fall under the Electronic Funds Transfer Act. We'll talk a little bit more about EFTA later in this program. Another way you can make payments are money transfer services, so like Western Union or MoneyGram, those kinds of wire services. You can go wire directly through your bank if you wanted to. And last but not least, the focus of today's program is mobile pay, these P2P, peer-to-peer payment systems. PayPal was the granddaddy of them all: Venmo, Zelle, Apple Pay, Cash App. There's so many variants of these payment apps out there right now. And we're going to go talk in more detail, but I'm going to talk about these 5 topics, which is, they're not, how are they set up? How are they linked? How are these transactions treated? What statutory protections are applicable? What happens? What kind of security risks are there? And what kind of privacy risks are there? And before we go any further, I'd like to introduce Richard Weishoff of our advisory board. Richard, would you like to sort of explain how questions are going to go forward so that everyone knows?
Sure. Sorry, Tracy. I finally figured out what was going on, and I'm all connected here. Welcome, everybody. I am Rich Weisenhoff, and I am the vice chair of the Consumer Protection Advisory Board. And I will be the facilitator for tonight's session. You should all be able to open up the chat feature on this webinar, and I will be monitoring it. So all you need to do is put a question into the chat box, and I will keep track of the questions. And when appropriate, if during the session it makes sense, I'll interrupt Tracy and ask her the question. Otherwise, we'll hold the rest of the questions to the end of the webinar, and I'll be glad to make sure that all the questions get to Tracy.
Yeah, and I'm happy to stay as long as you guys need to answer all your questions, and I'll slow down after every slide just in case there's something there. So just some brief stats, which were, when I was putting this together, the presentation together, I was pretty stunned about the numbers we're talking about. So we knew that we wanted contactless payments during the pandemic, but the word turbocharged has been used to describe the growth in this area. In January of 2020, which is now 2 years ago, retailers were reporting almost a 70% increase in contactless payment. In just April of 2020, PayPal's accounts increased by 7.5 million users. That's 135% growth. And it might have been in connection with the EIP payments that was coming, and that was how you could get the money faster. The second quarter of 2020, you had $37 billion alone. That's a B with a capital B, not an M, that was transferred just by Venmo. And that was a 52% increase from the year before. And by July 2020, you had over 60 million users added to Venmo. So a report that just came out earlier this month said that in 2021, Zelle drove $490 billion in transactions, doubling Venmo's $230 billion for the same time period. And as we will talk later, transactions don't mean transactions you intended. It could also mean fraudulent transactions. So this number is telling on many, many layers. And so the other area of contactless payment, other than a transaction from a consumer to a merchant, has been in the employer-employee realm. Domino's Pizza partnered with Branch so that their drivers would get same-day wages. So rather than waiting until every other week to get their wages, they were getting it that same day during the pandemic. And that was just to make sure that they were able to keep their business open. And this was a great service that they were able to provide to their drivers. So what is so great about e-payments? Why do we want to maybe promote this? Obviously, if it's trustworthy, if it's sound, it would allow access to goods and services, not only during the quarantine of social distancing, but it allows access to goods and services across the board, and it could foster economic growth across all kinds of digital formats, and it could spur an economic development in a lot of areas that most folks don't necessarily have access to. We could talk about folks that are unbanked or underbanked, but then you're talking about transactions that are difficult to engage in credit cards or cash. This could definitely assist if a trustworthy marketplace and legal protections could be created to foster this area. So you're thinking of getting a payment app, and so you want to know, how do we do these things? So first you have to pick the app, and we're not here to necessarily recommend one. There are two kinds. There is the one that's connected to your bank, Zelle being the largest. It's a consortium of banks that have gone to creating Zelle. The federal government is in the process of creating its own payment app, and that should be forthcoming before too long. But then the rest of them are non-bank apps. So the Apple Pays, the Venmos, those are not necessarily connected to a bank account. So you do your research, you determine which one makes the most sense to you, and maybe this presentation helps make that decision. You download the app. Whenever you download an app, you want to make sure it's the real app now. If you're on Apple, they're pretty good about cleaning up their app store. If you're on Android, you have to make sure you're not downloading a bogus version of an app. So you download the app, you create your account, and you can digitally link it to your bank account, a credit card, a debit card, or if you're really, really worried, you can even connect it to a prepaid debit card that you maybe buy at the grocery store. And so that's how you can fund and pay using these apps. Now, with your bank, whether it's Zelle or another app that's connected to your bank, that automatically goes to your bank account and it links it that way. And you just need to add your email address and your mobile. And so that's how you can use it on your phone. So how does it work? It's pretty simple. You open the app, you find the email or the phone number of the person you're trying to send money to. You put that into the contact field. You verify that you've got the right person. And because, names can be similar. And you enter the dollar. You may have to put in a memo as to what you're sending the money for. And you hit submit. And some apps have a verification. Do you really mean to send this? Some do not. And then it's away it goes, and it goes to the receiver, whoever you meant to send the money to, and then they have to accept it and transfer it to their bank account, to their card, debit card, credit card, whatever. The cost is usually free unless you're a business. Sometimes business accounts have a fee, and so the fees end up being anywhere from free to 3% when you think about the fees that go into these payment apps.
Tracy, Joe was asking, how do you know whether an app is legitimate?
You have to, the best way to do it is to go to the app's website and access the app store that way. So if you are in an Android environment, you like today, for example, I was on my phone and I wanted to download the McDonald's app, and there was like 4 options, and I literally didn't know which one it was because I was worried that one of them was fake. The best way to do it is to go to McDonald's website, and there should be a link somewhere on there that says get the app, and you click that. It'll take you directly to the correct app in your app store or in the Google Play or whatever your marketplace is for your device. So that's probably the safest way to do it. Looking at reviews is another way, but it's a lot easier if you go directly to the website. And you want to make sure you're on the real website, and we'll talk about Cash App and why that's not necessarily an easy find. later in this program. Any other questions?
Not yet. Thank you.
Sure. So I presaged this a little bit about there being different protections. So the Electronic Funds Transfer Act has less protections than the Fair Credit Billing Act. So, you know, you've all probably had the experience. You end up with something on your credit card. You're like, I don't recognize this. You contact your bank, you put in the dispute, and the money comes off your bank off of your credit card. It's no longer a debt. Maybe you go through back and forth with the merchant. Maybe there's fraud. And if there's fraud, the most you're on the hook is $50. Under the EFTA, which applies to your debit cards with the Visa MasterCard logo, and probably most of the transactions that are on payment apps, and note I said probably. So what are the protections there? If you report a problem before there's any unauthorized charges, your maximum loss is 0. Now, I don't know how many people know that there's a problem with a payment app transaction before they enter into it, and then they still enter into it. I don't know how that works, but that's the way the law is set up. If you discover a problem within 2 business days, then you have $50 maximum. If you're like me, you're not in your bank account on a daily basis, you're not likely to notice a problem caused by a payment app or your hybrid cards within 2 business days. So now if you're more than 2 days, but less than 2 months, you're on the hook for at most $500. So this is now escalating at a huge amount. But what if you don't catch on to some problem until 62 days later? That's it. You are on the hook for the entire loss. And that is the fundamental difference between the 2 federal laws as they apply to credit cards and non-credit transactions. So wire transactions like MoneyGram or Western Union fall under EFTA. Those hybrid cards fall under EFTA. And probably most of the transactions that you will be entering into with payment apps probably will fall under EFTA as well. So P2P, I keep saying peer-to-peer. So they were literally designed to give money to people you know. So all of the commercials you saw early on were 2 friends sitting at dinner fighting over the bill, and somebody sends money to their friend without them knowing it, right? This was always meant to be for a friendly transfer of money. But as I said at the top of the hour, because of the pandemic, we wanted contactless payments, and it blew up. So folks were entering into transactions using Venmo or Apple Pay or whatever through online shopping. You know, if you're on Etsy, chances are the Etsy store is asking for Apple Pay. Or if you were shopping somewhere online, they were probably asking for PayPal, maybe Venmo. They will go right on record, all of these providers, and say it's not recommended for online shopping. It is recommended for face-to-face transactions and for people you know and trust. I'm going to tell you, based on some real life examples, that just because you see the person doesn't mean you should be giving them money through any of these payment apps, unless you know for a fact where to find them and you can have some right of belief that this is a legitimate business. And we'll talk about some real examples of fraud, face-to-face fraud using payment apps. Most of these apps are managed by a third-party company, right? So Cash App, Apple Pay, Venmo, PayPal, they're not your bank. And so they might use the information that you're providing, your contact information, your purchase information, that kind of stuff, and sell it. So you're providing your information and you're being turned into a commodity for them as well. But if you ever come to any of our programs on cybersecurity, you will hear me say, don't give your information to people who don't need it. So if you use a third-party non-bank app, you're now giving your information, maybe even your banking information, to a third party, and you're entrusting them to keep it safe and secure, even if you're giving them permission in the fine print to sell some of that. Obviously, they're not going to sell your bank account information, but if they're not securing it, then you've got it. Now you've got your banking data in an alternative location as well. And we've already talked that it does not have the same protections as credit cards. And so if you're shopping online, I really suggest that you use true credit cards, only because if there is a problem, you have way more protections. Excuse me.
So I have a question from Debbie.
Sure.
She says, if my debit card has Visa logo on it, is it considered a credit card? Is that a hybrid card?
That's a hybrid card. So a credit card, and if you came to the Tuesday night program, the definition of credit is using someone else's money with the expectation that you'll pay it back. That's credit. These cards, these hybrid cards, as I call them, you're using your own money. So they're by definition not a credit card. So not only does it not building you any credit, it's fiscally responsible. I will definitely give you that. But it's not building you credit, and it's not protected by the Fair Credit Billing Act. It falls under EFTA. Okay. So you've now taken the leap. You've downloaded an app. What do you do to secure it? First thing, enter into the most secure phasing that you can. So does it want multi-factor authentication? Yes. Does it want Face ID? Go for it. Does it need your fingerprint? Take it. Whatever adds hurdles between a bad guy and your money, add it on there, because that's the best thing you can do. All the settings you can turn on to make your app secure, turn them on. And I'm going to keep saying this, only send money to people you personally know, because this will be key. Make sure that if you have the correct information, that you're not transposing numbers in the phone number, or maybe the email address has an underscore and you put in a hyphen. It could end up in the wrong person's hand. And unless that person is trustworthy, it's almost impossible to claw these payments back. So they would have to essentially reject the transaction or transfer it back. And I'm going to talk to you about transfer back scams. So a lot of people are probably not going to transfer any money back because they're going to think you're the scammer. So definitely want to double, triple check that you have the right phone number or the right email, whatever the contact is required to put into the app that you choose, triple check it. A lot of businesses are using payment apps. And again, if you're going into a brick and mortar location, you may have a bit more comfort level using these apps. I know Apple Pay is at CVS now, and my kid will go and just scan his card. So CVS is obviously different than, a pop-up shop that, wasn't there yesterday and won't be there tomorrow. I'm going to keep talking about being very, very, very careful about using these online. If there is any kind of operating system to update on your phone, update it. If there's any updates to the app, get that updated, because they are both, your phone and the app is trying to close a loophole that might be a security risk. So always want to keep them up to date if you're given a prompt. So how do you go about picking? And like I said, we don't provide any kind of recommendations. Consumer Reports, which if you guys are not familiar, it's a great, great magazine. They did a rating a few years back about the top ones out there: Apple Pay, Venmo, Cash App, Facebook's payment app, and then Zelle. And scored it. And the reason, and I'm gonna read the quote: "We think Apple Pay does a better job because they appear to collect less information about you when you're using their service." So the reason Apple Pay was ranked so high was because Apple has so very little information on you to set it up. So when I set up my Apple Pay, it's not connected to my bank account. It's not connected to a card of any kind. Someone transferred money to me, and that's how I set it up. So my Apple Pay account isn't connected to anything. And so that's why Consumer Reports ranked Apple Pay the safest, was because it was complete, it had the least amount of information. Obviously, if you're in an Android universe, that's not going to help you, right? So the problem with Zelle, and if you've been reading the paper, I think that it was the New York Times just did a huge expose on Zelle, is that because it's connected to your bank account, it has the most information on you, right? It's got your social security number, it's got your entire bank account connected to it. So if there's any kind of a security breach, like, proverbially your goose is cooked, right? And so for that reason, Consumer Reports ranked Zelle as the least secure, I guess, the lowest of their options that they rated. But Zelle is, as we said at the top of the hour, they have 460 billion dollars in transactions in 2021. So they are fast becoming the number one used payment app out there. It's just, as we'll talk in the slides coming up, the service after the fact with all of these apps is becoming a serious problem for consumers when there's fraud or a legitimate dispute. So we're going to spend some time here, and this is a dense slide, but we have a lot to go through. So what happens if there is an error or a fraud? As I talked about briefly, misdirected payments, you can't reverse the payment on your end. The providers won't help you if the recipient won't agree to it at the other end. So if you send it by mistake to the wrong address, there's almost nothing that can get done unless that person on the other end takes pity on you. If you're tricked into sending money to a scammer, and right now, Zelle is being used by scammers like you wouldn't believe. They're calling people saying, hey, there's been some fraud on your account. Your Zelle app has been used to send a lot of money. And 9 times out of 10, people are like, I don't have a Zelle account. I never turned my Zelle account on. They get all panicky. And so in order to help them, the scammer sends them a code on their cell phone or asks them to do a test transaction because they want to make sure it's been fixed. Whatever the excuse is, they're tricking the consumer into transferring money or providing direct access to the app. And I was in a program a few months ago talking about payment apps, and the industry insiders kept calling it customer assisted fraud. And so that tells you their mindset. They see consumers not as victims of criminals, but as almost co-conspirators in their own loss. And so that's the mindset behind a lot of these payment app companies. When you call them with real fraud, that's what happens. So real life example, we had an instance of outright fraud. The consumer had decided that, you know what, he wasn't going to eat this money. And so he took all of the money out of his Venmo account. And so when Venmo went back and realized, oh no, this was a fraudulent transaction, well, guess what? These payment apps will never go negative. They will find a way to make you pay. Venmo will actually take you to collections to get themselves back to zero. And because they're not credit card companies, they don't have the Fair Credit Billing Act, they don't have any responsibility to eat that money. And frankly, because they're not your bank, they don't have a long history of using insurance to cover it, right? These are not banks. And so if there's a dispute, you're almost without recourse. Now, the only way that you have a shot is if you do not pay as gift or friends and family. I have been told by these payment app providers that if you use gift or friends and family, they will treat it as cash. So to them, EFTA doesn't even apply in that situation. Now, I don't even agree with that, but that's the position that they have taken with me in past investigations. So if someone says, hey, pay it friends and family or pay it as gift so that I don't have to pay a fee on the other end as a business, ask yourself, do I trust this business who's trying to make an extra whatever amount of money by asking me to give up additional rights that I have in this transaction? And that should be a first red flag that you have, right? If you're paying money to someone you know, that's one thing. If you're, been working with this person at a craft fair for years and you know this person and you're like, fine, I'll pay you as gift or as friends and family, that's fine. You know them, but be very leery about someone you've never met, never worked with, asking for that.
Tracy, I got a question that came in
Sure.
that I also have a question about, and it comes in from Pat, and she wants to know, how does Venmo make money on P2P payments? I mean, how are these companies making money if there's no fees assessed?
Well, the fees are assessed against the businesses that you're doing business with on the one end. And
if it's an individual that you're paying?
well, so remember, Venmo comes out of, used to be part of PayPal and eBay. So there was always going to be a fee structure that was coming in. But you're right. If it's a peer-to-peer, a true peer-to-peer, it's not bringing them that kind of money. So for them, they need to push it into the business and to the economic realm to be able to really make a huge amount of money. But at the same time, it's a valid question, and it's not one that I can really readily answer as to how do they make money. If I pay you, Richard, where does the money come from? It doesn't come from me.
Exactly. Right.
I'm not paying for the app. The app is free. So how are they getting paid? They're not. From you and I, they wouldn't get paid. And so it's in their best interest to push people into making payments to businesses, yet they tell you that it's peer-to-peer and it's meant for people you know. So it's a bit of it's a little tension, if you will. We've talked about payment security, and so, but it bears repeating. Make sure your password on there is a good one. Passphrases, use passphrases for everything. It should be like disjointed words like chair, window, dog, and then the O in dog should be a 0 and the A in chair should be the @ sign. So come up with phrases to make it difficult. Pins, fingerprints, face ID, whatever multi-factor authentication is available, do that. Apple and Venmo, like I said, some of the apps, when you hit send, they'll verify, do you mean to send this? So that's a secondary, like, are you sure? Which is great. Privacy, you want to restrict it wherever possible. And so you have to dig deep into the app to see if you can limit how much of their information is shared or sold. Venmo's got a really weird feature. When you first download it, it has a default setting that every one of your transactions ends up on Twitter, which is, how the government investigators are definitely mining Venmo's Twitter feed for evidence of a lot of crimes. So if you don't want the money you spent for grandma showing up on Venmo's Twitter page, you want to shut that down if you end up downloading Venmo.
Okay. Don has asked a couple of questions. The first one, is Zelle inherently less secure than other peer-to-peer payments apps?
No, it's not less secure. It just has more information on you. And that's really what Consumer Reports' position was, that, dollars for donuts, these apps are essentially the same as on the consumer end as a function basis. So then you really need to then gauge them based on non-function issues. So how do you reach customer service? And you'll see as we talk about Cash App, why that's become a huge hotbed of fraud. How much information is required to be connected? And there's good and bad for that. Not having a lot of information makes it difficult for investigators like yours truly to be able to track down the bad guys, whereas Zelle has a lot of information. So you have to sort of look at the totality. And then it may be that having Zelle, because it's connected to your bank account and already in your mobile bank app, it may be nice and easy. You don't want to download something else. So there's a lot of intangibles that goes into that decision.
Yeah, it's funny because yesterday, for the first time, I have an M&T bank account, and I didn't realize they use Zelle, and I had to pay somebody who did a service for me, and they said, "Well, we only use Zelle," and I found out M&T uses it. So to that point, Don asks, when you look at security for Zelle, doesn't that mean you're really looking at the security from the online banking app you're using? So for me, it would be the M&T banking app, which is secure. I'm not really using an app beyond the M&T though.
Yes. And so your bank app, as I understand it, and this is probably way more IT than I'm super comfortable getting into, but your bank app is basically the interface. But Zelle is a consortium of banks so that everyone can access Zelle, but Zelle actually exists somewhere else. You're using your app as an interface to get to the server, the Zelle servers, and they're somewhere else. So that's, as I understand how it's set up, that's how it's supposed to work. But do you trust a bank to be more secure than a third party? I think some people would. Banks get robbed, they don't necessarily get hacked, but we all know that third party businesses get hacked all the time, right? I mean, whether it's Barnes and Noble or OPM, I mean, the government got hacked. So these are some of the intangibles that you have to think about is, security, function, what information is connected to it, ease of use, ease of accessing customer service. These are all intangibles, and do your research, talk to your friends, look at the interface, see which one is actually literally easier for you to be able to use. And then just see what's being used in your area. It may be that Facebook Pay is huge, in Oklahoma, but not many people are using it here. You know what I mean? So you also have to think about where you are thinking about engaging in transactions. And if you're using it as a peer-to-peer, what do your peers use? So that way you can end up being able to use it and efficiently and effectively.
Thanks.
So case and fraud examples. So parking lot pirates, these are guys who will approach you in a parking lot and say, "Hey, I've got a auto body shop. I've been in this business for years. I happen to have all of my supplies in my truck. I see you've got a ding, and I can take care of it for you right here, right now." And true story, we were after this family of dent bandits for quite some time, and we were finally able to issue vandalism charges. What they do is they drill a hole in the dent, use it to pull the dent out. They smear, I don't know what it is, it's like toothpaste, and they tell you, leave it on for 2 days, and then when you wash it off, it'll be good as new. Well, in 2 days, when you wash it off, what you find is 2 holes in your car. So in this particular instance, they asked for Venmo. So Venmo was used, and it was in the name of a woman. So that's one red flag. I'm talking to a man. Why is his Venmo account in the name of a woman? And when we did a search of this woman, it turned out that name was an alias of who we think was this person's sister-in-law. And that's how we ended up into this family of dent bandits, parking lot pirates. But they basically used a fake name to set up the Venmo account, connected it to an email address they just made up. And as we were following this family of dent pirates, they were constantly changing their phone number using burner cell phone numbers. So that's how easy it is to set up fake name, fake email, and disposable cell phone, and you've got yourself a Venmo account. And so this is why payment apps are now like the wild, wild west for criminals, because you can't find them. But it took some doing, because the particular consumer actually got a hold of the license plate of the car. And so we were able to find the family, and but it took some doing. So be aware of parking lot pirates, but this is a real example of how easy it is to set up a Venmo or other payment app, and how easy it is to abuse it. We've seen a lot of instances of romance scams where, some sob story is told as to why they can't open up a bank account. Can I send you some checks? You deposit it and send me money by PayPal. And so what is essentially happening is that this person was becoming a money mule, and these checks were written on bank accounts, and these were counterfeit checks. And after a while, some of those checks didn't clear, and yet the sweetheart had not wired money out, but sent money out on PayPal. And when that came to light, of course, the romantic interest had disappeared. We've had instances where identity thieves are opening up accounts in their names. And this was the most bizarre situation. We were unable to communicate with PayPal about this account because PayPal insisted that all communication should be through the email of the fake PayPal account. And we were like, this is an instance of identity theft. That account doesn't belong to Joe consumer. It's a fake account. And it took a lot of beating our heads against the wall before we were able to actually start to have a conversation about identity theft on this particular transaction. Digital wallet scams. So one of the things you might end up getting is a message through the app that says, hey, I sent you money by mistake. Can you send it back? You should cancel or reject the transaction, not send it back. So this is how the scam works. They steal a credit card. They use that card to send you $100. The money's there in your account. You see it and you're like, okay, I'll send it back. Well, you send the $100 back. Meanwhile, the person whose card got stolen disputes it. So that 100 comes out of your account. So now you're out $100. The person with the stolen credit card is made whole, and the bad guy is now $100 richer. So don't send money back, cancel or reject the transaction. So that's the digital wallet scam. Job scams that I've seen, they've been given a check to buy equipment for a job, and these are Google Hangout or Google Meets, usually Google Hangout, I don't know why, is where the interviews happen. It's a real quick interview. Questions are very pro forma, and you're like, how is this a real job interview? But you really want the job, and all of a sudden they're going to give you money because you need some special equipment. And so you deposit this money, and they want you to then buy it using your payment app, right? Most don't realize that checks can take up to 2 weeks to clear. Now, your bank will make it available. It's almost like a micro loan, if you will. They'll see that the all indicia is that this is a real check and it's a real account. They'll move the money into your account. Then they'll send it to the Fed to get it presented and have it all, the exchange and the clearinghouse work done. And in that time, you realize it's a bad check, or it's a counterfeit, or there's no money in the account. Now the money's out and you've used it to buy some software or some equipment that doesn't actually exist for a new job that never existed. So it was all a big scam to begin with. So these are real life examples of things that we have seen. So this is so prevalent. It actually has a name. It's called the eBay Motors scam, but it's really a motor vehicle scam. It could be on almost anything. We saw it started with cars, and then it moved to any kind of motorized vehicle. And then by the pandemic, pets. Pets were a huge version of the scam. So they come up with some sob story as to why they're selling the car or the jet ski or the boat or whatever for, like really low number. Oh, my husband's deployed and, we need the money, or this is my ex-husband's, I hated him, I want to sell it for nothing, or this whole such sentimental value, I just need it out of it. Whatever the reason is, they come up with some excuse as to why they're selling a $20,000 boat for $5,000, right? They were citing COVID as a reason that they can't meet in person, but when it came to pets, they were remote and they were offering, or sometimes even with motorized equipment, they were offering to ship it. So it became this escrow shipping scam variant of this. So you didn't actually have a picture of the car, of the boat, or the dog, or the bird. It was some stock photo. So if you take a picture and you upload it to a Google Images search, it'll tell you all the different instances that photograph has been used. And that's how you can verify if someone's a romance scammer or if they're trying to do some sort of online marketplace scam. So they would claim that somehow this transaction was under an escrow, either with eBay or whatever the shipping company is. And the shipping company, if it even existed, would have no idea their name was being used. And you would give them a down payment or you would pay outright, and they would give you this very legitimate looking escrow, manifest, a shipping manifest. And now you're waiting for your boat or for your dog, and it would never come. For some reason, these were primarily coming out of Romania or Cameroon, but it's also domestic and homegrown as well. And I don't have really updated numbers, but the FBI was reporting about $57 million just to this eBay Motors variant for 2014 and 2017. Now, one version of this that you're going to see is with used cars. So as we know, with supply chain issues right now, cars are expensive. New cars are hard to find. Used cars are just escalating in value. And you've got some really disreputable dealers and some unlicensed dealers out there buying cars at auction or at salvage. These cars are dangerous, and they'll put them up on Craigslist Marketplace or Auto Trader or whatnot, and they'll sell you this car. When you go to meet them face to face, they'll be like, oh, this is my wife's car, this is my car, this is in great shape, right? You're meeting them face to face, so you're like, okay, this is a real person, right? This isn't like some kitty cat that's supposed to be in Michigan. I'm standing across 5 feet away from this guy who's selling me this car. But he's not giving you his real name. So this is another real example. This person asked for payment by Venmo. His Venmo account was BMW Beast. And when we subpoenaed Venmo, the account was opened by Mr. BMW Beast, first name BMW, last name Beast. And but he wasn't very smart. He actually gave the consumer his cell phone, his real cell phone, not a burner phone. And so we were able to find him. But this car needed thousands upon thousands of dollars in repair, and it was not roadworthy, and it was never titled to him, much less his wife, and it had been sold at an auction. So you want to be very, very wary if you're buying used cars right now. And if you are, don't use payment apps, especially if it doesn't have a person's actual name attached to the account.
Tracy, why isn't eBay held more responsible for fraudulent buyers or sellers? It seems like they get their money regardless.
Well, if you're buying on eBay and closing on eBay, then you're covered. problem is that a lot of these scammers, if it starts on eBay, they're pulling you off the platform. Maybe they're sending you a fake invoice and it's taking you to someplace that looks like it's eBay, but it's not. You have to be very careful. Or they're just moving you off platform and saying, oh, well, this escrow shipping company requires us to use this platform, whatever it is. If you start on eBay, end on eBay. But if you're doing the transaction on Craigslist or Facebook or Nextdoor Marketplace or AutoTrader or whatever, you don't have any protections for eBay, and you have no protections really, other than your own wits at that point. So I mentioned a bit earlier about Cash App having its own unique problems. So there's this mysterious drop-off problem that businesses that use Cash App have reported. So if you have a problem with Cash App, you can't reach them in any way except for email or through the website. There's no phone number. So industrious criminals have capitalized on that. And when you do a Google search for Cash App phone number, you will find many, many websites that will take you directly to a call center that would be happy to steal money from you. And so what happens is, so a customer is saying, hey, I've got this problem, I've got this wrong transaction. And so they're calling to dispute this transaction, and they're calling the bad guy. So the bad guy not only now has access to the Cash App for the consumer, but somehow they're able to reach in, pull the money. Remember, it's very difficult but not impossible to claw back. They're clawing back the money from the merchant, but diverting it to their own account, so that the money is, so that the bank, the business's account is just showing money is just mysteriously dropping off because these bad guys are just siphoning it whenever a customer calls over an issue. And obviously the business is never contacted about the dispute, the consumer never gets the money, and the business is out the money as well. And so it's a unique issue that for some reason it's a Cash App specific issue. So this brings us to the end of the presentation. If you have questions that are kind of specific to you, or if you think you may have a dispute, but you don't know if this is something you need to file a complaint about, get in touch with us during the week. We're definitely here for you. You can follow us on social media because we do put out regular alerts as well. But if folks have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Okay, everybody, this would be the time that if you have a question, if you type it into the chat box, I'll be able to call it out and ask Tracy for you.
Rich, did you have any questions? Or did I answer?
Here's one from Don. Zelle says never transfer money to yourself.
I'm not sure how you would do that.
Yeah, I don't know if that's even a possibility.
I guess it's possible if you have multiple accounts, and maybe that's somehow triggers a red flag in their system, but I hadn't heard that.
So I heard that the IRS is now looking at these P2P for transactions, for possibly tax requirements. Have you heard that? There was an article about that if it's over $600 that you're transferring, that there now is, you may have to report it.
Yeah, I suppose so. I thought you were going two ways with it. One, if they.
Oh, go ahead. Whichever way you like.
Yeah, I was thinking that you were thinking that they were going to allow people to pay their taxes that way, and I suppose it's possible, and they would use the new federal one when it becomes available. Yeah. But I think that if you are set up as a business, I believe they will send they could send some kind of 1099 or some kind of tax document. Is it 600 sounds to be that magic threshold between, I thought it was 500, but it may be 600.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, I remember reading an article about it, so I was just kind of
Mhm.
curious about that, that they may actually be requiring you to report it.
Yeah.
And there are things popping up here. So from Karen, she asked if you don't set up an account, how can you use the interface of a product?
Oh, you mean with my Apple Pay?
Yeah.
It comes automatically on my phone, and someone, I guess, decided they were going to pay me, and they just stuck it into my digital wallet, and voila, I had an Apple Pay account, even though it's not connected to any kind of card or account. I don't know how that happened. It just sort of did. But I don't think you can do it with other apps, to be
Right.
honest. But, as Mr. BMW Beast example, and as the parking lot pirates example that I gave earlier, you can set up an account with complete lies and they don't know any better.
Hmm. Debbie asked an interesting question. She said she heard that Gas Buddy has a service to get discounts, but you have to put your credit card or bank info into their systems. What do you think about this? She saw it on NBC
Oh
News.
yeah, I don't have Gas Buddy. I have Get Upside, but that's the same thing. That you put in your card that you're going to use. That way they can track your purchases when you claim the discount.
Mhm.
9 times out of 10, they want you to upload the receipt anyway. Again, every time you share information with a third party, you have to trust that that third party is going to protect whatever it is you're sharing with them. And so you want to share as little as possible. Sharing credit cards is a lot safer than sharing a debit card. If there's fraud on your credit card, you put it on dispute, and at most it sits as debt on your credit card while you work it out. But if money's stolen off of your credit card, it becomes debt. But if it's stolen off of your debit card, that money is out of your account until you settle the dispute with your bank, and so you don't have that money available to make bill payments. So if you are going to set up a Gas Buddy or a Get Upside or any kind of app that requires you to connect a card, connect it to a credit card.
Yeah. Yeah, my daughter actually works for Get Upside.
Ah,
Um, she does all the graphics for them. So anybody who's on Get Upside and getting emails, all the graphics on there, she does the design work for them. And because of that, I use it also, and it's an upload of receipts for me, so that seems to work fine. And I haven't collected anything yet back. So Joe's asking, basically the safest way through all of this is to pay by credit card, isn't
yes.
it?
Yes, it is.
Yeah,
Um,
honestly, the first time I heard about Venmo was when both daughters were in college, and they would all go out to eat together, and they were looking for a way to split the tab without ever actually opening up cash, opening up their wallets to do that.
yes,
And
and that's exactly what I was going to say. Think of it as the cash alternative. When would you have paid someone you know in cash? This becomes the alternative to having to carry cash. Um, that's like the safest way, exactly as you said, to split the dinner and then give the money to somebody you know and you owe. That's how it was
right,
created. That was the purpose for which these were created, but the economy is driving its use in a different direction.
and it's become a very big business.
Absolutely.
So my wife keeps money in. She doesn't take it out of Venmo. She uses Venmo. So she's got, people pay her and she just leaves it there. And then she's using that as sort of like a checking account in some respects because the money comes in, she lets it sit there. It's not collecting any interest, but with the bank interest rates they stay, it doesn't matter anyway. And then when she has to pay somebody out, she has a balance that she keeps in Venmo and pays out that way.
Right.
So
That's something you can definitely do with all of these apps is you can carry a balance and use the balance to make payments, or you can transfer it to your account.
yeah.
Exactly.
I found it interesting that you said that PayPal is different from other mobile pay options. A lot of places that we've gone to want us to use PayPal to pay for things.
No,
Uh,
PayPal is the granddaddy of them all. It was the very
right.
first mobile payment platform. It was very much tied to eBay. It is available to be used elsewhere off of the eBay platform now, but it was the first of its kind And so you can use PayPal as an app now as well. It used to be that it was just a desktop application through eBay, but you can absolutely use it the same way now.
Here's an interesting one. The Don says that members of his church want to make donations online, and they're using Zelle as their preference. There's no fees for that.
Well, hopefully you know when you trust your fellow parishioners. I mean, that's an example of a transaction that you can have some confidence in, because these are people you know if you're making donations to your church.
Are there other questions from anyone?
All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us this evening. And like I said, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us tomorrow or next week or thereafter, should you ever need us. And with that, I'm going to thank you, Richard, for joining us and being a great facilitator. And thank you everyone for joining us. And so we're going to put an end to the recording. And for those who are still with us, the plan is to circulate the link to everybody who registered in case you'd like to be able to watch this again. It will be up on our YouTube page probably next week. Thank you.
Thank you, Tracy. This was very informative. I really appreciate you putting the time in.
Thank you, everyone.